So we're just going to do a couple of quick introductions. My name's Laura Bickle, and I'm here with Tiffany Joel and Dave Clausen. We are all psychological services consultants with the Waterloo Region District School Board, and we have all been with the school board for many, many, many years. I think I'm the most junior, and I've been with the school board since 2008. So, so we've all been around for a long time, and we all are parents as well. Dave and I both have daughters that are in their 20s, and Tiffany has kids still at home, so she's still fighting some of the battles. But we've all been through the ringer right alongside the rest of you. So we really want this session to be about giving you concrete strategies and ways to help you build and develop the skill of perseverance in your child, because perseverance is very much a skill. So even if your child is currently struggling with perseverance, with distress tolerance, it's not lost. They can learn how to persevere. And this is all about just giving you guys some ideas for how you can help. And with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Dave.
All right. So initial question we thought to ourselves is who perseveres? Who is it that's able to battle through difficult things? And quite frankly, the answer we came up with was everyone. Everyone is able to persevere and do difficult things. And the reason we say that is we were thinking about toddlers and even infants, quite frankly, for that matter. When kids are born, they know virtually nothing. They're not able to walk, they're not able to talk, and these are incredibly difficult things that need to be accomplished. And most of the time, for most kids, these things are accomplished. And if you've ever watched a child learn to walk, the number of times that they fall, and they, sort of smile, especially depending on an adult response. They smile, they get up, and they do it again, and then they do it again, and they do it again. And there's no difficulty attached to failure. There's no one saying, oh, you shouldn't do that. And there doesn't seem to be any self-talk with a child saying, oh, I'm not very good at this. They just learn to do it. Okay. And so that's kind of our initial state. We are able to persevere through very, very difficult things. And then along the way, it seems that we learn to not persevere, quite frankly. And we learn to talk to ourselves and think about things in such a way that we actually stop doing difficult things and taking things on and learning them no matter how hard it is. Okay. And so starting point is we're able to do this. And what we're aiming for is the ending point is that we end up there again. Okay.
I think this is me. So what do you need to persevere? What do we need to put into place? So there are two things that we were thinking about. One had to do with the environment and the things that the people around you are doing, and the other is internal to the person. So we're going to start a little bit with an example about what you need. And I'm going to take you back to daycare days. If any of you have kids still at that stage, oh, it will get better. But I also think it's a really important place. So picture. All right, I will describe showing up to pick up my kids at daycare. So they're 22 months apart, so it's a little bit chaotic. And it's winter. And so getting out of that building, there's a lot of stuff that needs to get on their bodies, okay? Those wonderful staff. So I'm standing there and I want them out, right? And I want to get them dressed, I want to get them out. And the lovely staff are standing there waiting. A bit of coaching, a bit of cheerleading on the side, but their hands aren't touching the snowsuit, which is amazing to me. Okay, so that idea of the supportive environment, the coaching, making sure they are able to do it, stepping in if they're frustrated and not able in that moment. Like if they're not able to do it, that's something else. But if they are able to do it, giving them the space and the time to do it for themselves. Okay, I think that was the example I had, and I was going to let Laura describe maybe an older version of that.
So as we were preparing for this presentation, we were talking about, as we're saying here, what do you need to persevere? And one of the things that we talked about was distress tolerance. So distress tolerance means what it sounds like, a tolerance for uncomfortable feelings. And failure is a very uncomfortable feeling. Making mistakes is a very uncomfortable feeling. So we talked about in order to persevere, we need to help our children develop distress tolerance. But what's really interesting about that is when you start to think about it, we have to actually back that up, that we have to develop our own distress tolerance for our children's distress. Okay, so in Tiffany's example that she just gave, it's distressing as the parent to watch your child, you know, trying to kind of figure out what they're doing, and they're getting upset, and you see that they're upset and you want to swoop in and save the day. So that's all about your own distress tolerance. So that's actually kind of a first step that we need to take is developing our own tolerance to observe our child's distress and to know where is the sort of sweet spot in terms of their distress. We don't want them to be over distressed or else they're not going to be able to function, but we want to give them enough of a challenge that they develop some of that tolerance for those uncomfortable feelings. And I think I went totally off topic there, but that was, anyways, sorry guys. The example I was going to give with older kids is, and if any of you have teenagers over the age of 16, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, is when your children are learning to drive. You want an exercise in distress tolerance for everybody in the car, that's it. It's distressing for the person learning to drive, it's distressing for the parent. And you know, it's a skill that most kids are going to need to develop unless they live in you know, major urban centers. But the example that I wanted to give was of my youngest daughter, who has needed some support to develop perseverance over the years. And when she'll be so mad at me if she knows I tell this example, but when she did her first written test, so this is just to get the learner's permit, or the G1 or whatever it's called, she failed. And she got very upset and very distressed. And knowing my daughter, I knew that the longer she had to ruminate on that failure, the less likely she would be to persevere and actually go back and rewrite it. So I took a gamble and I said, okay, my dear, tomorrow morning, we're actually going to go back and you're going to write it again. So you're going to study a little more tonight. We're going to write it again tomorrow. She did not like that idea, but she acquiesced to that. So we went the next morning, and unfortunately, she failed it again. But she only failed one small part. There's like a couple of sections and she failed one part of it. And she was again very upset, and she started saying, I'm just never going to do this. I'm just not going to drive. And of course, in my head, I'm thinking, lifelong taxi driver? I don't think so. So I said, you know what? I have all day. So we're actually going to sit here. You're going to study until you feel ready, and you're going to write it again. And so after some protests, she did indeed do that. And we walked out of that drive test center with her G1. And since then, she has said to me, now she's actually studying psychology as well. And in her reflections, she has said, you know, I'm so glad you did that, because even though I hated you at the time and I hated everything about it, she said, I think if you would have given me time to really think about that mistake, it would have been so much harder for me to go back and do it. So that's just an example of kind of that dual distress tolerance on both of our parts. Because let me tell you, I didn't know if I was doing the right thing or not. And it was distressing to see her distressed. But I think that was a good lesson in perseverance and kind of picking yourself up and kind of getting back on the horse, the bike, the car, whatever the metaphor you want to use. And I think we're turning back over to Dave now.
I think so. Okay. So let's these are great examples, and these are, you know, you can apply these to all kinds of different things, including school and sports and learning piano or any kind of artistic endeavor. You can apply it to all of those different things. Okay. So let's start to take this and break it down and make it a little bit more practical. Okay, so any of you who have seen us before may well have seen this triangle. This is the cognitive behavior triangle. And we have thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Just very, very quickly, behavior is what you do. A feeling is an emotion. It's almost always one word. It is what you feel. And a thought is almost always a sentence or a picture. Okay, so these are the definitions, and the double arrows mean that all of these things influence each other. And so if we think about, let's take giving up for a second, okay? So the opposite of perseverance is giving up. So if the behavior is giving up, The feeling will probably be one of several different things. We're going to have frustration. We're going to feel helpless. We're going to feel like there's absolutely nothing I can do about this. Those would be the kinds of feelings that you would have. And if you had been able to interview Laura's daughter at the moment she failed for the second time, that's probably, what do you feel? And that's probably what would have come out. What are the thoughts? And the thoughts would be things like, I can't do this. I will never be able to do this. It doesn't matter anyways. This isn't a big deal. This is not something that I really care about anymore. Driving, who cares about driving? That's not going to matter. And so these would be the kinds of thoughts that you would probably hear among many, 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 many others. Okay. So there's some predictability to what goes on within this triangle. And so we don't know exactly. And again, it would have been really interesting had Laura had her notepad and said, okay, let's go through this. Right now you're giving up. What do you feel? What are you thinking? And it would have been really interesting to hear. And I bet it would have been along those lines. Okay, so let's take the opposite. So this is what we're actually trying to develop. If the behavior is perseverance, the feeling that tends to go along with that is some level of confidence, although there might also be a little bit of doubt, but there will be some level of confidence. And there will be a desire. This is something I want. So if Laura hadn't told her daughter, look, you're going back tomorrow, if she said, Mom, I'm going back tomorrow, and I am getting that thing. And if you had asked her, what is it that you're feeling? It's like, I want this. I really want to be able to drive. It matters to me. This is important. Okay. And so, and she may well have said, you know what? I'm pretty sure that if I study, I can get it. So there would have been some level of confidence. Okay. And the thoughts that go along with that, I've already talked a little bit about some of those, right? It's like, I can do this. Yep, I failed and I can make it better. This is a skill I can learn. This this is something that I really want. So there's a feeling of desire, but there's also a thought. This matters to me. This is important. So those are the kinds of things that we're going to want to develop if we want to develop perseverance within our children. Okay. Laura, Tiffany, anything to add to that?
I think I'm up on the next slide here, so I'll add a few things to that. So how do we do this? So it's really about being a thinking coach. So, we're all used to what a coach does. What does a coach do in sports, right? A coach says, hey, you did this way, let's try doing it this way now, right? So really it's about being a thinking coach, because perseverance is about the thoughts. The thoughts are typically what precede the feelings. If I have the thought that, I can't do this, this sucks, I'm never going to be able to do this, I'm going to feel pretty crappy and I'm going to give up. So we need to really start at the point of the thoughts. So it's all about first of all, getting the kids to notice what their thoughts are. So what are you thinking? As Dave said, if I would have been really on the ball, I would have had my notepad and I would have been saying to Audrey in those moments, what are you thinking? What are the thoughts that are you having? Fortunately, she's quite, she likes to talk. So I think she was saying them out loud with some expletives in there as well, if I'm remembering the story correctly. So she was quite clear about what the thoughts were. But if your child isn't, you can take some educated guesses as to what they might be thinking, right? If your kid is struggling to persevere through a homework task, you can anticipate that maybe they're thinking, well, this sucks. And what does this matter? And when am I ever going to use this? And you can actually kind of say that out loud. You can, if your child isn't able or isn't articulating what they're thinking, you can say, like, based on your face right now, I think you're thinking this kind of sucks. And, maybe it does, but let's try to get our way through it. So you can start to offer some helpful alternatives, right? So yes, this sucks right now, but you know what, you can do this, you can make this better, we can work through this. And you can model this yourself. And this is, there's real power in modeling certain things as a parent. I think unfortunately we model a lot of things to the negative that we don't notice, and we don't realize the power of modeling things in a different way. We all get frustrated. We all struggle with perseverance and distress tolerance and frustration tolerance. And it's okay to let your kid know that you're human and fallible and that you too experience these same emotions. So if you're finding yourself frustrated with something, articulate your thinking out loud. Say, you know, I'm really feeling frustrated with this right now, and I really want to just like throw this thing out. I really want to give it up, but I'm going to take some deep breaths because this matters. This is important, and I need to get my way through this. And you know what? If I flub it up again, I'm going to come back and try again. So really, kind of modeling that thought process out loud can be powerful as well. And I'm not sure. I think we're turning it back to Dave.
Actually, I wanna tag along on one thing. Can you go back, Tiffany? I want to tag along on one thing, and we didn't talk about this. Sorry, I'm sorry I didn't talk about this, guys. One of the important things about our thoughts is that we can use them to help push us to do what we need to do, or we can use them to justify not doing what we need to do. Okay. And so when we start hearing things like, this doesn't matter anyways, who cares about this? What good is this going to do me? Those are the kinds of thoughts that that are going to prevent us from moving. So there's the modeling part, which is incredibly powerful. And there's the, sort of teaching, hey, here are some thoughts that might be helpful. But then there's also catching the thoughts that prevent, the thoughts that stop you from moving forward into perseverance. Okay. All right, next slide. Okay, so what do we do with some of this? Some of this stuff actually comes more from sports psychology than other realms. And so there are a bunch of things we can do. And most of the time when people give up, it is after you've made a mistake. It is after something has happened that you don't like. So this could be losing, this could be making a mistake, this could be all kinds of things. And one of the things that athletes do, or a bunch of athletes do anyways, is they have what they call a mistake ritual. And a mistake ritual is really a very simple action that they perform again and again, and it's to remind them, yes, something happened that I didn't like. So there's an acknowledgement, something happened that I didn't like. It was my fault. I shouldn't have done it. And there's something I can do about it. And so I'll get my emotions back to where they need to be, and I will keep going. So I know that I've managed to talk to a bunch of different athletes, and some beach volleyball players. Actually, there were two really common mistake rituals there. One of them was smoothing out the sand around them with their feet. And the reason they did this actually was to sort of smooth things out internally. And they actually used the smoothing out the sand as a metaphor for what's happening internally. Oh, there was a bump up there. I made a mistake, didn't like that. And so now I'm just going to smooth things out. And they have to be able to do this quickly. So it's something that happens again and again and again. If you see athletes smoothing out the sand with their feet, that may be one of the things that's going on. Another thing that they tended to do was because it's beach volleyball, they're often wearing sunglasses. They take off their glasses and they just do a quick clean, and then they're ready to go again. Okay. And it all has a purpose. So what you do doesn't actually make any difference. What it means to you, that's what's important. So you take any action and you attribute some meaning to that action. And that's my mistake ritual. Okay. And so that may be something that you want to develop with your child. This can work for younger kids, but it tends to be something that's probably a little bit better for older ones. Okay. What else can we do with that? All right, here's one of the things that I love to have people do. And again, this comes from sports psychology. So I had a hockey player, defenseman, who I talked to for a while. And he found that when he made a mistake, it really bothered him. And he'd come to the bench and he would sit and he would run through the mistake again and again and again in his head. And it would sort of get him down and he'd be more tense and he'd play worse. So I suggested that he do something different. Okay. And what I suggested was that he actually performed the action in his head properly. So if he made a pass that got picked off, what I wanted him to do was to redo that whole play and do it right, whether he should have skated with it, whether he should have passed to someone else, whether he should have just dumped it out. but to do the play properly in his head. Okay. And so this has a lot to do with academics, quite frankly. This is something that's really easy to do. You do a test, you make a mistake, guess what? Run through the problem again, do it right. And then I always suggested to him that he do it right twice, just to make sure that he's really got it. And then as soon as you've done it, it's like, yep, I've got it. I know how to do it. I've corrected my mistake. I'm good to go. And so when you turn a mistake immediately into doing it properly, that's one of the things that helps give you confidence that, oh yeah, doesn't matter what comes along. I can correct it and I can learn it, and then I can do it properly. Okay. So these are two different things that I think lots of people have found helpful in terms of switching from feeling just frustrated to, oh, wait a minute, there's something I can do.
It's a lot of buttons to push. So based on the triangle, you can imagine where this is going to come in. So if you're thinking about it differently, it will help you feel differently about facing something that is challenging. If you learn strategies to handle that distress, and then you do the action, which is to continue to push forward in something that you're finding challenging, over time, you are going to experience more success, okay? And you're going to push through and see, you know what, even if I didn't do it perfectly, I got through more than I thought I could, right? So you're starting to get different information, different feedback, and your ability to go farther in it. So thinking about the little kiddo in daycare, right? The sense of pride they have when they get that snowsuit on their own without an adult helping them is powerful, right? And that's what we want to build, is that internal feeling of pride of having pushed through something that was initially hard, right? And then getting through it, because that's what we want kids to be thinking about, and adults, is not only, okay, I'm going to make mistakes, that's part of learning, but I've been able to learn in the past, and even if this is hard right now, it's worth pushing through because I can learn this too. Okay? Those are some of the thoughts I had on that. Laura, what are you thinking?
I'm just thinking, like, especially with little kids, or even some of our older kids might not notice when they've persevered either. So it's, find those opportunities to say, look, like, you were obviously finding that really, really hard. I saw you were getting frustrated, and you pushed your way through it, and look at what you accomplished. So really pointing out, being explicit about what they did, and kind of what that process was, not just good job, you did it, pointing out the process of going from the discomfort to the pride.
I actually do that in assessments sometimes when kids, they say, I don't think I'm going to get this. And I often just ignore it. And then when they keep going, whether they get it right or wrong, I always name that is, I love how you stuck with that, right? Like just that idea of, I saw that, right? Like I think that's really important for kids. And this next one, I think many may feel, watching other people make mistakes is really helpful. Knowing that other people, so in this world of social media, where often people are putting their best, only their best forward, it can be super helpful to see, using sports from Dave's example, thinking about, oh my gosh, if anyone watches football, I don't know, this weekend, people made mistakes, right? And then they came back on the field and they kept going. If you watch hockey, that's a big one in my house. There are mistakes made all the time, and just recognizing that and seeing that people keep coming back from that. I know a lot of times in school they'll talk about how many times Thomas Edison, how many versions he put together in his experimentation before he got the success, because you need to recognize that other people are making mistakes and they're not perfect either, right? There's a normalcy to that, and it's the way we have to do things, or how would you ever discover anything, right? I know in my house that involves watching a lot of people make mistakes on video games or be taught things, and so there's a piece to that though, and sometimes it's funny, like I don't know how this landing is going to go on this slide, but sometimes there's a funny piece to it, but at the same time it's about seeing mistakes happen and people come back and they're able to do it. Anything else on that one, you guys? Or go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, and then we get to practice. And so knowing these things is great, and turning it into action is really the thing that matters. So if we can suggest one thing to you, it's pick one of the things that we talked about here today, something that struck you that was like, oh, okay, I think I want to give that a shot. And really put it into practice with your child to see whether it's able to make some difference for them or not. Because it is in consistent practice. We don't do this once. If you, again, go back to your child learning to walk, how many days, how many hours, how many falls over and over and over and over. And that's the same with the practice that's necessary for learning to persevere. We do it again and again and again and again. And then at the end, we point out, look, you see that pride that you feel. You feel how good it is to have accomplished this thing that you were after. You did that, and you did it by keeping going, right? And so that whole message, I mean, that to me always needs to happen. Yeah, Tiffany.
I was just thinking about that piece around watching other people make mistakes and thinking about how we can model good thinking around that too, right? Because kids hear what we say about things. And if we hear them making fun of someone who makes a mistake, being able to say, hey, let's see how it turns out. Look how good they feel. Like pointing out, making mistakes normal and not negative, I guess, is what I want to say. That idea of naming it, because sometimes kids will make fun of each other or they will be making fun of people online. And so it's helpful to intervene, I think, in that thought process because kids will internalize that message to themselves, right? Sorry. I was pondering as you were talking.
Good. And that's all I had to say on that. I don't know if either of you have anything more, but I think at this point we'd be open for questions.